Okay. Good evening, Erev Tov. Thank you, everybody, for coming tonight in a awful weather night. I think Hashem aligned the storm just to hit us in a rush hour and lasting through the night, but it just gives everybody extra sachar, extra reward for coming here to listen to words of Torah. Tonight's shiur is graciously dedicated by our dear friends Leon and Denise and family in memory of their father, Moshe ben Yaish, Moshe al-Malech, Zichrono Libracha. Tonight is his nahala. I'll just say a couple of words. Many people in this room knew him much better than I did. But the things, one of the many things that stood out from my adolescence, which now I can say as a synagogue rabbi, I'll go on the record and say this. I envy the type of Bet Knesset that once was, the type of synagogue that used to be run in the olden days, namely by Mr. Malech Zichrono Libracha, which for lack of a better term, I label the no-nonsense synagogue. It was, I'm coming to shul because I'm here to pray. And if anybody was going to impede on that goal, on that destination, then, for lack of a better term again, you were going to hear it. And it was not something that was commended or condoned by him or any of the older generation. It was, I come to Bet Knesset, I come to shul because this is my time to pray. And that's something that I miss. Today, I think among many communities, Bet Knesset, for many reasons, has become, a place to just come and see friends that you don't see during the week. And there is a truth to that, an advantage to that. And yes, for many, many of us, that's the one time a week we get to see our community members, and it's very important to do so, to come that Shabbat, that Friday night, or that for the Kiddush afterwards. But I think it's important to distinguish the two parts of the service. There should be from 8:30 or from 9 o'clock, whenever you walk into Bet Knesset, there should be a no-nonsense Bet Knesset. That's what it should be. It should be, I'm going to devote the next 2.5 hours to praying, to my connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to hearing the tefillot, to hearing the piyutim, hearing all the wonderful chants and melodies that we have as Sephardic Jews, as Moroccan Jews, that we uphold and upkeep till this day, in 2025, decades after Jews left Morocco. And that's something that we feel really, really strongly about. So in a little bit, I miss those days. And although we do a good job keeping that, but I just wish that we can go back to let's just come and pray for 2 hours, 2.5 hours. We'll keep the talking, we'll keep the schmoozing, we'll keep the bezos and the hugs for the end, for afterwards during the Kiddush. You can do it all you want for all afternoon. But I miss those days when tefillah was directed with a firm hand. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, because that's the way it was. That's the way it was for hundreds of years. And who knows, maybe those listening here today and those listening online can maybe help out in their own way and be a part of maybe a little change. And I'm going to come to Bet Knesset, whatever it is, I'm going to say Shabbat Shalom, and then I'm going to open my Siddur. And I'm going to listen. And when the Torah comes out and the Chazan and the Baal Koreh is reading the Parasha, I'm not going to say a word, because I know the importance of what it is to hear every single word of the Parasha and the Haftarah. And I'm not going to walk out of the Haftarah. And I'm not going to walk out to have schmoozes and stuff like that and Kiddush. And, that's not what it's about. The Kiddush comes after. After Musaf, everybody's done. You can go and have your Kiddush. But for 2.5 hours, that's what we're here for. That's what we come to Bet Knesset. Just like you're coming here tonight to hear a shiur, when I come to shul on Saturday, I'm coming to pray. And that's one of the amazing, amazing memories that I have of Mr. Moshe al-Malech, Zichrono Libracha, and how he ran his Bet Knesset. He ran it with a firm hand, but he was successful in doing so. And that, among many of the other things that all of you are here tonight, paying tribute to. For a wonderful man. So to Leon, Denise, and family, thank you again. To do it for many, many more years. Amen. Ken Yiratzon. for those who've attended this class over the weeks and the years now, you know that I like to look at things at the parasha differently. We look at the stories of our Tanakh and our Chumash in much more profound and deeper ways, and we look at things beyond what's written on the actual text. One of the, we'll call it general Jewish knowledge questions that we ask is, how long were the Jews in Mitzrayim for? How long were the Jews in Egypt? So you'll hear many answers. On one hand, you're going to hear, well, the Jews were in Egypt for 210 years. Yes, that is true. That's how long they were in Mitzrayim. They were in Egypt for 210 years. How long were they supposed to be in Egypt for? Oh, that's a different question. How long were they supposed to be in Egypt for? So the general number that we hear is 400. And 400 comes from the covenant that Abraham Avinu had made with Hashem, that his descendants are going to be in a foreign land and they're going to suffer for 400 years. However, you open up this week's parasha and you see something, a number that we've never seen before. Umoshav b'nei Yisrael ashi yashevu b'Misraim. You want to know the habitation of the Jewish people in Egypt? 30 shana ve'arba me'ot shana. 430 years. That's the number that's given in this week's parasha. Vahi mikesh 30 shana ve'arba me'ot shana. And it was at the end of that 430 years, Vahi be'etzem hayom hazeh, on that day, Yatzeu kol tzivot Hashem me'eretz Mitzrayim. All the Jews left. This is the parasha where the Jews leave Egypt, Yetziat Mitzrayim. This is the parasha of Pesach. Yes, Pesach is not far away. This is it. This is 430 years is what the Torah tells us. And many of the Rishonim try to reconcile these two numbers. The contradiction in the Pesukim. Here it says 430. And in Parashat Lech Lecha, when Abraham Avinu is making this pact with Hashem, the Torah tells us, Vayomer Abraham, God says to Abraham, Yado ateda ki ger yezaracha beret olahem, vavadum ve'ainu otam arba me'ot shana. Arba me'ot is 400. So, the first commentator, I want to say the first commentator, but the most famous commentator to try to reconcile this difference is Rashi. And why he's most famous? Because he's Rashi, and that's why everyone learns Rashi. So that's the answer that people know. And Rashi says, that's not a problem. Don't worry about it. That when Hashem goes and informs Abraham Avinu that it's going to be 400 years, he is referring to the time that elapsed from the birth of his son Yitzchak. Ki be'Yitzchak yikareh lecha zara. Yitzchak, Isaac, is going to be that's the beginning of his offspring, and therefore you have to start calculating 400 years from the birth of his son. And although they dwelled in Israel, in Eretz Canaan, it didn't belong to them yet, but together with the years that they were enslaved, it equals 400 years. But our verse, our pasuk, in this week's parasha, which says 430, it's counting from the time where they actually made the pact. The actual Brit Ben HaBetarim, the covenant of the parts in Parashat Lech Lecha. So when God actually tells him, your children are going to be enslaved for 400 years, that count doesn't start till later when Yitzchak is born. The question that we have to figure out, that we're going to expand today, is, why does the pasuk in this week's parasha add 30 years dating back to the covenant of the parts, which is before Isaac was born? And because if the galut, if the exile really started at that covenant, then why did Hashem tell him it's only going to be 400 years? And if the decree was only 400 years from the birth of Yitzchak, then why does this pasuk in this week's parasha say 430? Like, pick one and just stick with it, and that would be the end of it. Beautiful. So those are the questions that we're going to try to answer today, and we're going to go a lot deeper into some ideas that we're going to see. We quoted a Gemara 2 weeks ago in our class, a Gemara Masechet Shabbat, that says, Le'olam al yishaneh adam beno ben abanim. A person, a father, a mother, should never treat one child, one son, differently than the rest of his sons. Shebishvil mishkal shnei shlaim milat yashenatan Yaakov leYosef yoter mishar banav. Because of the two weights of fine wool extra that Yaakov gave to his son Yosef, in that coat, in that tunic that he gave him, nitkanu bo echav, the brothers got jealous. Venitgalgel hadavar, one thing led to the other as a consequence. V'yardu avotenu leMisraim, and the Jews ended up in Egypt. Because of favoritism that Yaakov showed to Yosef at that moment, then that's what happened. They ended up going in Egypt. And Tosafot, on this Gemara, is very perplexed. They said, what are you talking about? How could this be the reason? It's not the reason. God already told Abraham, already well before this, that in the Brit Ben Abetarim, that the Jews were going to be, his descendants were going to be enslaved in the land. So, well before Yosef was sold into slavery. So Tosafot, we mentioned a couple weeks ago, suggests one answer, and he says, yes, they're going to be in a foreign land, like God said, but the suffering, the extreme servitude that the Jews experience, no. That only came because the brothers sold Yosef. And had the brothers not sold Yosef, or had Yaakov not caused that jealousy by giving Yosef that beautiful coat, and the brothers consequently would have not sold him, then there wouldn't have been that main slavery and servitude. So there's that argue with Tosfot, but that's what Tosfot says. I want to give you the answer today of the Shelah Kadosh. He says that really, the 400 years, he argues with Rashi, he says the 400 years did not start from when Isaac Yitzchak was born. No. He says the 400 years started when God told Abraham, your children are going to be enslaved for 400 years. Like the Pasuk says. And it started at that moment because Abraham, hearing that from God, felt distressed. That's a decree that he hears, that his descendants, generations and generations, are going to be enslaved. That's not easy for somebody to hear, especially someone like Abraham, who is full of love and full of chesed and full of kindness. So the galut began on that night. So Bnei Israel deserved to depart Egypt 400 years from that moment. But because of the jealousy of the brothers, because of the jealousy of the Shevatim, caused them to sin. Seeing that Yaakov loved his son Yosef more than any one of his sons, it caused him to sell him to slavery. Where did Yosef end up? In Egypt. Now, says the Shelah Kadosh, unbelievable. As a result of selling him to Egypt, Yosef himself suffered until he was 30 years old. And it was at that time, when he was 30, where he was elevated to become Viceroy of Egypt, elevated to the position of, today what we call Vice President. For the first 30 years, Yosef suffered. He suffered. His brothers hated him. They didn't love him. Threw him into pits. I can imagine bullying him in the soccer field. You can imagine what was going on in Yosef's life. It was really bad. And then the worst thing, it culminated with being sold to Egypt, being thrown in jail for the first 30 years of his life. To atone for those 30 years, says the Shelah Kadosh, 30 more years of exile were added to the 400. So all in all, they had to stay in Egypt for 430 years. And therefore, now it kind of reconciles what we've been saying, reconciles those two psukim. God tells Abraham at the covenant of the parts of the Brit Ben Abetarim, that your children, v'avadu, are going to be in the land, lo lahem, v'avadum ve'inu otam, arba me'ot shana, 400 years. In other words, at the time of Abraham, that's all it was supposed to be. It was 400 years. But after the sale of Yosef, another 30 years were added, and that's where we get this week's parasha, which says the total amount was 430 years because of that sale. We have support for this idea based on something that maybe some of you know, but if not, I'm pretty sure that some of you are going to be hearing this for the first time. Our rabbis tell us that the children of Ephrayim was one of the sons of Yosef. Yosef had two sons, Ephraim and Menashe, or Menashe and Ephraim. And the children of Ephraim left Egypt 30 years prior to the designated time. They figured that the exile began at the time of the covenant of the parts, when God spoke to Abraham, and they calculated 400 years. And their 400 years was 30 years earlier than when they were supposed to leave, based on what we said. In fact, there's a Gemara in Masechet Sanhedrin that says, Uman ninhu metim shecheya Yecheskel. Who were the deceased, the dead bodies that the prophet Yecheskel resurrected? Amarav elu bnei Ephraim. These are the tribe, the children of Ephraim, shemanu leketz veta'u, that calculated the end, the ketz, but they made a mistake. And Rashi says that they erroneously calculated 400 years of the exile and the bondage from that Brit Ben Abetarim, rather from the birth of Yitzchak. What's Rashi's source to this? He says there's a midrash that says 300,000 people from this tribe, from Shevet Ephraim, died as a punishment for leaving 30 years early. How does he prove it? He proves it from the pasuk in Beshalach, the first pasuk in Beshalach. Vahi Beshalach Paro et ha'am. Beshalach, Paro sends, and it was when Paro sends a nation out, Velo nacham Elohim derech eretz Pelishtim. God did not want them to go through the land of Pelishtim, lest they get scared of war and they're going to want to go back to Egypt. That's what Velo nacham Elohim, God did not direct them. Look what the Midrash says, unbelievable Midrash. He says, "Sheta'u shivto shel Mitzrayim v'yatzu miMitzrayim ad shelo shilem haketz." These people of Ephraim left Egypt, but the time wasn't ripe yet. V'nehergu mehem shoshim ribo. 300,000 of them died. V'lama nehergu? Why were they killed? Shechashvu miyom shenidbar Abraham b'Abetarim v'ta'u shloshim shana. Because they calculate from the time when Abraham got the message from God. Who killed him? Varagum Plishtim. The Plishtim killed him. Vehayu atzmotehem shtuchin baderech chomarim chomarim. Their bones were piled on the road. You know what 300,000 people's bones are? What it looks like? It's just piled on the road because they killed from the Plishtim. Shekvaraya shomshim shana shiatzu, because all the bodies disintegrated. All you saw was bones. Ad shelo yatzu achirim ben Mitzrayim. 30 years it took for the brothers to see this leaving Egypt. Amar Hashem says, if my children leaving Egypt see bones of their brothers on the road, I'm not continuing. These were my brothers. Look what happened to them. I'm going back. What did God do? Natal damam shel bnei Ephraim v'taval bo kelav kebiyachol. God took his garments, whatever that means, and he dipped them in the blood of Ephraim, of these children that was, at the time they were killed. He took his garments and dipped it into blood. Shneimar, as the pasuk says, Madua edom nilvushecha. Why is your clothing red? Amar Hashem, God says, Eni mitnachem ad she'enkom nikmatam shendemei Ephraim. I will not be consoled until I avenge the deaths of the children of Ephraim. And that's the meaning of the pasuk, Velo nacham Elohim. Vahi beshalach paro et ha'am, velo nacham Elohim. Literally means, you open up Art Scroll, it says that God didn't direct him in that. But lo nacham Elohim can also mean he was not consoled. Elohim was not consoled, because I'm not going to be consoled for the death of my sons, okay, until there's vengeance, until the Jewish people leave and figure this out. What does this mean? So it's, according to what we're saying here, we understand how these people, the children of Ephraim, miscalculated. In truth, yes, 400 years was supposed to start from Brit Ben Abetarim, when Abraham was informed that that's what's going to happen. But the Shevatim sinned. The Shevatim sold their brother to Egypt. Because of the jealousy, 30 years were added, according to the Shlach Kadosh, to atone for those 30 years. Why did they miscalculate? Think about it. Who were Ephraim? Ephraim was the son of Yosef. And they were not involved in the sale of Yosef, mainly because he wasn't born. Okay? They weren't involved in the sale of Yosef. Now, there is this idea, Kol Yisrael Arevin Zelazeh, which means that every Jew is responsible for one another. And therefore, if one gets punished, everyone's got, we don't punish individually, we punish as a whole. We don't reward individually, we reward as a whole. But that only applies if you have an opportunity to protest and you fail to do so. Then you're responsible. In the case of Ephraim, he wasn't born. He wasn't born at that time of the sale. So he didn't have the opportunity to protest. So why is he being punished? So therefore, the sons of Ephraim thought that they didn't have to serve the 30 extra years. Why do I need to wait? I wasn't part of that sale. I'm leaving now. My 400 years, this is the time I have my calculator. I took my Apple phone. I don't have Apple phone. Android. I calculated 400 years. This is the day. Pesach, I'm out. I'm leaving. But they were wrong. Why were they wrong? Even though they didn't take part of the sale, they still required atonement Because their father, Yosef, was partially at fault. Yosef wasn't innocent. Yosef himself was partially responsible for his sale into slavery. Because, he liked to meter pinchos, right? He said, with his brothers, he wasn't just sitting back there. He loved the fact that he was the favorited son. He enjoyed it. So because he was a little bit at fault, and in fact, like we said a couple of weeks ago, the 10 martyrs that came from Yosef, it was one of them was his, and by reporting his brother's bad deeds to their father, he caused a sale. So that's one reason why Bnei Ephrayim were punished. Another reason why they were punished is because if you look at Parashat Shemot 2 weeks ago, God speaks to Moshe for the first time, and he tells him, Lech ve'asafta ziknei Yisrael, I want you to go and gather the elders, and you're going to tell them, Hashem lo yavodechem nira elai, that God, the God of your forefathers, appeared to me. And he said, Pakod pakati etchem, indeed I have taken account of you, ve'tasu lachem beMitzrayim, and what's being done to you for Egypt. And Rashi says, what's pakod pakati? Indeed I have taken account of you. It's a very strange lashon, it's a very strange expression. And Rashi says, what the last person to say pakod pakati was? Yosef. At the end of Yosef's life, in the end of Parashat Vayechi, the pasuk says, "Vayashba Yosef et Bnei Israel." God made Yosef made Bnei Israel swear, "Pakod yifkod Elohim etchem ve'alitem et atmotai mizeh." I'm making you swear that God will remember you, and you're going to bring my bones out of this place. That when you leave, the day you leave, you're going to bring my bones. I'm buried here, but you're going to bring my bones to Israel. And Rashi over there says that the next person to use that lashon, pakod pakati, that's the sign. And until you hear that pakod pakati, then it's not time yet. Because Yosef already made the promise. When you hear pakod yifkod, when you hear that, then it's time to go. Now, Ephraim, they knew this, but they didn't hear anything. It wasn't until Moshe. When Moshe heard this, now it's time to leave. So they knew better to leave and depart Mitzrayim before hearing those specific words. And if they truly believed that the Exodus had arrived, how did they leave Mitzrayim without the bones of their father? This is their father they're talking about. He's the one that made the oath. So they were punished accordingly. There's another reason why we could say they're being punished. According to their calculation, the Galut ended and everything is completed. Why would you leave Egypt without your brothers? Why are you just picking up and going without at least bothering to ask all of your brothers that you've been spending the last centuries being enslaved for? And now you're departing alone? Now you're leaving by yourself? Aren't you reawakening that sin again of Mechirat Yosef? Impervious to the suffering of your brothers and what's happening? Oh, bye, have a good one. See you later. I hope it goes well for you. I'm leaving. What kind of brotherhood is that? What kind of unity is that? They heard the brothers admit to each other, Aval Hashemim anachnu, alachinu asher ayinu tzarat nafsho. We were guilty of what we did to our brothers. So how is Ephraim picking up and leaving? So therefore they were punished, and they died, 300,000 of them, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu judges tzaddikim exactly. So it was very tragic what happened, leaving 30 years early. So what possessed him to do it? What possessed 300,000 people to do it and just leave? What if they didn't participate in the sale of Yosef? So what if they didn't participate in the sale of Yosef? If that's the excuse that they're giving, we didn't get involved in that sale. Well, neither did their brother Menashe. Neither did Binyamin. So they didn't pick up and leave. They didn't leave 30 years early. Neither of them elected to leave Mitzrayim towards Israel. They abided by the teaching of Pirkei Avot. Al tifrosh min hatzibur. Don't separate from the community. So what prompted them to leave? To answer this question, I'm going to go back to that midrash that we cited above, where what did Hashem do after Bnei Ephraim were killed? He took the blood of Bnei Ephraim and he dipped his garments into it. And the pasuk says, "Why is it red on your clothing?" The Navi is saying, "Why is it red on your clothing?" to God. Hashem says, "I'm not going to be consoled until I avenge the deaths of the children of Ephraim." This is part of the prophecy of Yeshayahu. The prophecy in the opening chapter, we read this haftarah in right before Tisha B'Av. Who is this coming from Edom with solid garments and botzra? This one who's red, why is it red on your clothing? Why are your garments like those of someone treading in Gat? And this is Hashem saying that I have vengeance in my heart. This is in reference. This is the very famous Nebuah of Yeshayahu. So what are we saying here? What context is this prophecy of Yeshayahu taking place? It's talking about the future times. It's talking about the Geulah, the final Geulah. So what we're saying here is that in the time of Mashiach, the future Geulah, the one that we're waiting for, God is going to wear garments immersed in blood, in red blood, the blood of the sons of Ephraim. And that's going to prompt the Jewish people to say, why are your garments red? Why are your garments like those who treaded in Gat, in the city of the Plishtim? Gat was the city of Plishtim. That's why today, by the way, Kiryat Gat, that's in the south, is by Azza. That's where the Plishtim lived. It's very odd. Why would they say that? Because the Midrash is insinuating that 300,000 people of Ephraim were killed as a punishment for leaving early. If that's true, why are they meriting to have God have His garments, whatever those garments look like, being dipped in the blood? So we have to say that Ephraim, Bnei Ephraim, were not Reshaim, Chas v'Shalom. They were not evil people at all. I'm making a stance, I'm making a point, and I'm doing whatever I want. No. They made a mistake in the calculation. They made a mistake, they left Mitzrayim before the term was completed. The only thing we need to figure out is why did Hashem dip His garments in that blood? So now we're going to talk about Mashiach a little bit. Oh, I got everyone's attention. Well, I hope I had your attention till now. But now you mentioned Mashiach, everyone wants to listen. Baruch Hashem. We hope, we wait for. We're told that in preparation for the future Geulah, Hashem is going to send first Mashiach ben Yosef, who is the anointed one, the son of Yosef. He will come from Shevet Ephraim. Yosef had two sons. Mashiach ben Yosef comes from Shevet Ephraim. He will come before Mashiach ben David, who comes from Shevet Yehuda. This is what the Gemara says. Tanu Rabbanan, Masechet Sukkah. Mashiach ben David, she'atid leigalot b'mera b'yamenu. The Mashiach ben David, who's going to come Bezrat Hashem soon. Omer lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, she'al mimeni davar ve'eten lecha. God's going to say to him, ask me something, and I will grant it of you. It's like a genie. Whatever you want. Let me know. Ask, and I'm going to give it to you. Shneimar, asapera el chok, ani ayom yeliticha, she'al mimeni ve'etena goyim nachalatecha. That's a pasuk in Tehillim. Kevan shera'a Mashiach ben Yosef sheneherag. When Mashiach ben David saw or sees in the future that Mashiach ben Yosef was killed, because he was killed, he is going to be killed. Omer lefanav, he says to God, Ribono shel olam, eni mevakesh mimcha el hayim. All I want is life. I just want to live. I don't want to die like him. I want to live. Omer lo hayim ad shelo amarta kvar hitnabe alecha David avicha. He goes, before you even requested life, you should know your father David already gave it to you. Shneimar chayim shal mimecha natata lo. He asked life of you, and you've already granted it to him. So the Maharsha explains this Gemara that says that first Mashiach ben Yosef is going to come. There's going to be one Mashiach that's going to come save and attempt to save the Jewish people, but he's going to be killed. He's going to be killed by a multitude of idolaters that will return to Yerushalayim. The complete Geulah is not going to happen until Mashiach ben David comes. That's explained in many different places. In fact, the Arizal writes that in our daily tefillot, in our Amidah, one of the brachot that we have, it's Yishkon B'toch Yerushalayim, the bracha Bonei Yerushalayim. Over there, the wording is V'kiseh David Avdecha Mehera Letocha Tachin. And the Moroccans answer Tachin, right? Yeah. All right. The chair, the throne of David, your servant, shall be established soon in its midst. And Tachin is like, yes, establish it, build it, get it ready. Says the Arizal, when you say that phrase, you should be praying that Mashiach ben Yosef is not killed. Have kavanah that when it comes time to the war, that Mashiach ben Yosef is not killed. How is that learned from the words? it seems to be that, again, Mashiach ben Yosef is going to come first. Technically, he's supposed to be killed in the war of Gog and Magog, which many people say we're experiencing right now. That is paving the way for Mashiach ben David. When you say, V'kiseh David avdecha mehera betochat achil, meaning I want the throne of David to come and be erected and be built quickly, I wanted to do it before Mashiach ben Yosef gets killed. That's the idea. I don't want him to be killed. I don't want this to prolong. I don't want the death of Mashiach ben Yosef to prolong Mashiach ben David. Bring Mashiach ben David now so Mashiach ben Yosef doesn't have to die.
Do we know which son of David Mashiach ben David comes from?
The lineage. It's just...
Would it be Shlomo?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's the lineage. Oh, yeah, that's the lineage of Shlomo. Yeah, no, you're right, but it's Shlomo. Yes, right, that's right, it's Shlomo. Yeah. Now look at the unbelievable things from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. With the Geulah Mitzrayim, when you look at what happened from the start of the story of Egypt all the way to the exodus of Egypt, you will also notice that Hashem arranged Yosef to be sent to Egypt before Yehuda. Similar to what's going to happen at the end of days. Maseh Avot Siman Labanim. Whatever happens in the Torah, don't think that it was only a story that was 3,000-4,000 years ago. It's going to happen again. The Midrash says, Yosef yarad v'Misraim v'gadar atzmo min ha'erva. Yosef went down to Egypt and he safeguarded himself from immorality. V'nigderu Yisrael b'zchuto. And in his merit, the Jewish people were safeguarded also from immorality. Amar Rabbi Chaya bar Yosef, Kedai haya gadur erva be'atzmo shenigala Yisrael yado. Big statement. He says, the fact that he withheld from the sin with the wife of Potiphar, that of itself deserved Bnei Israel to be redeemed. Anyways, what happens right after Yosef goes to Egypt and he withholds from sinning with Potiphar? He moves up the ladder. He becomes second in command. All of a sudden, Yaakov sends who to Egypt? Yehuda. He sends Yehuda to Egypt. Ve'et Yehuda shalach lefanav el Yosef lehorot lefanav Goshna. He sends Yehuda ahead of him to Yosef to prepare ahead of him in Goshen. Rashi says, what does it mean lehorot lefanav? You know what lehorot means? To teach. Lehorot, the Lashon Torah is to teach. So Rashi says, Letaken lo bet Talmud shemisham tetzeh ora'ah. You know why Yehuda went to Mitzrayim? Went to Goshen? To set up yeshivas. To set up Jewish day schools. To set up all the Jewish institutions. That's what he did. Yeah. It was void of Jews. There was no Jews. He was the first one. So he had to make sure it was all ready for his family to come down. So that says the Bnei Yissaschar, the rationale for Yaakov sending Yehuda to Yosef. He says that the Galut of Egypt, the exile of Mitzrayim, encompassed all the 4 Galuyot, all the 4 exiles that the Jews were going to experience throughout their history. And therefore, if the Galut of the exile encompassed the 4 exiles, so same with the Geulah, the exodus of Mitzrayim encompasses all the 4 Geulot that was going to take place. As the Pasuk says. Just like you left the land of Egypt, I'm going to show you wonders in the end of days. So Yaakov sends Yehuda to join Yosef to make preparations for the future Geulah. What's the future Geulah? It's going to start with who? Mashiach ben Yosef. Just like Yosef was first, Mashiach ben Yosef is going to be first. And then Yehuda is going to come and join because Mashiach ben David comes from Yehuda. And this is why HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted Yosef to descend to Egypt, just like Mashiach ben Yosef is going to come first before Mashiach ben David. In fact, when the Pasuk says, Ve'et Yehuda shalach lefanav el Yosef, that he sent Yehuda ahead to Yosef, lehorot lefanav Goshna. Goshna literally means to Goshen. Goshna is also 358 Gematria, which is the same Gematria as the word Mashiach. Goshna and Mashiach. Alluding that the future of Geulah, what's happening in Egypt, is alluding to the future Geulah when Mashiach is going to come. Amazing words by the Bnei Yissaschar. Which leads us to a Haftarah that many of us are familiar with on the 8th day of Pesach, the Haftarah of Od Hayom, which talks about the final Geulah. And the Pasuk says, V'haya bayom ahu, and it will be on that day. Yosif Adonai Shenit Yado Liknot Et She'ar Amo. that God will once again show His hand to acquire the remnant of His people. And all those that remain from Assyria, Egypt, Patroth, Cush, Elam, Shinar, He's going to raise a banner. He's going to gather the remnants of the Jewish people and the remnants of Yehuda, the dispersed of Yehuda, me'arba kanfot haaretz. Vesara kinat Ephrayim v'tzorerei Yehuda ikaretu. The jealousy of Ephraim shall stop, and the oppressors of Yehuda shall be cut off. Ephraim lo yikanet Yehuda, v'Yehuda lo yatzoret Ephraim. That Ephraim will not be jealous anymore of Yehuda, and Yehuda will not harass Ephraim. And Rashi says, what is this referring to? It refers to Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David. They're not going to be jealous of each other. In the end of the days, Yosef and Yehuda, and that whole battle that happened, Vayigash elav Yehuda, that conflict, that headbutting, that's going to cease, that's going to end. And this kind of answers what we've started with. Why did the children of Ephraim make that mistake? They made that mistake, they left Mitzrayim prematurely, because they thought they were following the footsteps of their great-great-great-grandfather Yosef, paving the way for the Jewish people. According to their calculation, the 400 years of Galut were over. Since the additional 30 years of Galut were account of Mechirat Yosef, and I wasn't involved in Mechirat Yosef. I wasn't involved in that sale. So therefore, we're supposed to leave Egypt separately. Guess what? My great-grandfather Joseph, he came to Egypt by himself. And he was the first there. And I know in the future there's going to be a Mashiach ben Yosef who's also going to set it up. And maybe this is it, said the children of Ephraim, because Mashiach ben Yosef comes from us. It comes from my tribe. And this is the ultimate Geulah Mitzrayim for 400 years. God promised us this has to be it. So we have to pave the way. We need to leave first. Because that's the way it has to be. They were brave men. They were warriors. But they left without their brothers. They realized that they might be killed along the way, just like Mashiach ben Yosef might be killed along the way. And they were willing to accept that risk, just like their father did. Just like their father Yosef accepted the risk. But he prevailed. But they were mistaken. Because you can't leave Egypt without explicit permission from Hashem to do so. And in no way was it similar to what their father Yosef did. Because Yosef didn't go to Egypt on his free will. He was sold. And Mashiach ben Yosef is only going to come and redeem the Jewish people, or attempt to redeem the Jewish people when he's told to do so. But the children of Ephraim did it on their own free will. And that was their mistake. But their intentions were l'shem shamayim. Their intentions were for the good. They sacrificed their lives for Kedushat Hashem. And because of that, God doesn't ignore that. God doesn't ignore that. So God says, you know what? There's going to be a day, Bayomahu, where everything is going to close. And when that day comes, I need to avenge for the deaths of these children. 300,000 Jews who decided to give up their lives because they thought this was it. So what am I going to do? I'm going to dip my garments. I'm going to dip my own garments in their blood. And in the time of the future Geulah, when Mashiach ben Yosef is going to come initially to try to save the Jewish people and will perish, that's what's going to happen. God's going to take his garments and he's going to dip in the blood of the sons of Ephraim, and he's going to exact revenge from all those goyim that wanted to kill them. So it turns out they didn't die in vain. Because they acted l'shem shamayim, Hashem is going to use their blood to hasten the Geulah. And in fact, there's a Gemara Masechet Sanhedrin, we're almost there in Daf Yomi, that says, Tanu Rabbanan, B'sha'ah shehipil Nebuchadnezzar harasha et Hananiah, Mishael, v'Azariah lekivshan ha'esh. On the day when the wicked Nebuchadnezzar, the evil Babylonian commander who destroyed the Bet HaMikdash, on the day where he threw the three Hananiah, Mishael, v'Azariah into the fiery furnace, Amar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu leYechezkel, God told Yechezkel, Lech v'cheyeh metim bebikat Dura. Go and resurrect the dead in the plains of Dura. And the Gemara earlier says that those dead that he was referring to were the sons of Ephraim. They were the sons of Ephraim who miscalculated the end of the Galut, the period of the bondage. Why did Bnei Israel, or why did Hashem see fit specifically to resurrect the bones of Ephrayim exactly at the time when Nebuchadnezzar threw Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah into that fire? Why was it specifically at that time? Well, we know the answer. We can suggest based on what we said. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wanted to demonstrate to the whole world that just as those three men were willing to sacrifice their lives for Kedushat Hashem, so too the bones of the sons of Ephraim deserve to be resurrected for their act of self-sacrifice. Yes, they made an error, they made a mistake, and they suffered the ultimate punishment, but their intentions were L'Shem Shamayim. And therefore, once they were punished, because Hashem exacts punishment exactly how it needs to be, and having their bones scattered along the path and put in piles, the time came to resurrect those bones, simultaneously at the same time to save Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. It was a clear-cut demonstration that showed and demonstrated their own self-sacrifice. I read this Divrei Torah. I decided to give it over because I think there's quite a few things that we can take out from here, but I'm just going to focus on one. I think there's a lot of information tonight that we said over, and certainly a lot of chidushim. If there's anything that we can learn from this and remember, number one is the time of the Geulah has been set, and we have to understand that while we have an opportunity to hasten the Geulah, while we have an opportunity to learn and pray and do ma'asim tovim and all the good things to bring Mashiach closer, but that can't go, we can't be all risk-taking. We can't do things that are going to show the world and make the world upset. Because if the time of Geulah is not there, then it's just going to fall apart. Some say that we're in Ikveta de Mashiach, which is true. I believe it. I believe that this is the end. I believe we're right there. I believe Mashiach is around the corner. I believe that every day he can come. Look around the world, you feel it. It's happening. Look what they're talking about. Look the last 2 days. Look what Trump all of a sudden brings up. Maybe they should relocate. Out of the blue, he says this line, and the whole world's talking about it. Maybe let's just relocate 2 million people. Make you think a little bit. Make you think about all of our enemies in that one corridor for thousands and thousands of years. One man gets up and he says, yeah, let's just relocate them in different countries. What a world of difference that would mean. Is that paving? Maybe. I don't know. I'm not sure. I hope. But other than what we can do for ourselves and our prayers and our tefillah and our tefillot and our mitzvot and the Torah study and all, we have to let things play out. We can't do erratic things that cause chilulei Hashem, that cause desecration of God's name. Because there's a lot of people that do that, unfortunately. A lot of people want to take their own hands. So number one question I get asked from many, many little kids, Rabbi Kadosh, why can't we just go and build the Beit HaMikdash? Right? Why don't we just grab stones and all our machinery and just go up there and start building? And the only answer I have to that question, because it's a really, really deep question, is just not time yet. It's not time yet. There was a group of people that thought it was time. They were 30 years off, and it cost them their lives. There are a lot of people right now that are losing their lives, sacrificing themselves for the state of Israel and for the future of our nation. And they do so because they're hoping that this day of the Geulah comes soon. This is what we need to do, unfortunately. This is part of the Galut Edom that still is very much prevalent in our day-to-day lives. It's there, it's here. And what we can only do is hope and pray that the days of Kisei David Me'era Betochat Achim, that throne of David gets erected and built very, very speedily. We hope that when Mashiach ben Yosef comes first, that God accepts him right away, he's not killed, and Mashiach ben David could join forces without jealousy, without sinat chinam, without hatred, without slandering and disrespecting one another or different communities or whatnot. It's just coming together. That's what Hashem wants to see. And Be'ezat Hashem, We won't make that mistake. B'ezrat Hashem, we will wait calmly. We want it bad, but we know that Hashem will send it when the time is right. And until then, we just keep on doing what we're doing. And in the zechut of our Torah and the mitzvot, the limud Torah, the tefillot, are the previous generations that are watching over us, and maybe, hopefully, the improvements in our lives in areas that need to be improved, we will see the Geulah Shelema. We will see a Mashiach come very, very soon. We will see peace among all the lands, the Jews amongst all the nations. Nations will come to respect us because we will be at the height. We will be the kings of the world. We will be the ones that are showing how to live a proper life in Avodat Hashem, believing in one Hashem. We will see that. Amen.